welcome to the Kankakee Area Football Podcast. I'm Steve Soucie, joined as always by Mason Schweizer. How are we doing this afternoon, Mason?
Couldn't be better, Souce. How are you?
Not too bad, getting ready for round one here. And, I think, this is one of those situations where you just kind of, try to get ready for week one as fast as you can, because it feels like it's a little bit of chaos between wrapping up the regular season and getting headlong right into the postseason. Some real interesting kind of scenarios kind of came into play for a lot of the Kankakee area football teams. So let's just dive right into it. Start traditionally, as we do with the city teams. Start at the top of the enrollment chart with the 6A qualifier in this field. Bradley Bourbonnais lands a number 2 seed in the 6A South bracket, facing Shepherd in the first round. But looking at it from kind of a wide angle lens, I don't think this could have gone much better for Bradley in terms of the possible scenarios that we thought might have materialized.
I'm right there with you. When people look at Class 6A kind of from that general standpoint, all season long it's been, can anybody get in the way of a Nazareth and East St. Louis state championship game? And coming down into Class 6A for the first time ever, which I was a little surprised by in my research. But for the first time ever, Bradley Bourbonnais in Class 6A with the season that the Boilers have had, they think that they can be one of those teams. Now, that game would be a semifinal with East St. Louis. They've got to get by some decent teams on the way there. A potential game with St. Lawrence, potential rematch against a Crete-Monee team that they handled 41-6 in week 2, but a Crete-Monee team that's a lot different and a lot better now. But yeah, especially when we were looking at maybe getting Joliet Catholic as the Boilers' first round matchup initially, I think this is about as ideal of a draw as they really could have asked for.
Yeah, I mean, it ironically came down to tiebreaker points in a situation that's ended up separating Shepherd and Joliet Catholic. It would have been, I guess, a little bit ironic if Joliet Catholic would have been that first round opponent, because when Bradley was looking for a potential opponent to fill their vacancy on their schedule all summer long, it seemed to be that Joliet Catholic was going to be one of the few options, and that for whatever reason that game could not get put together. So if they did end up playing in the playoffs, that would have been, kind of things coming full circle, if you would. But like you said, East St. Louis on the other side of the bracket, Nazareth at times was looking like they might slide into that South bracket. They didn't. They're all the way on the other side. They're on the north side of the bracket, so no chance of them. Glenwood, another team, a good team in 6A. They're the top seed in the bracket. East St. Louis is the 8. So one of those two teams is going to take each other out in the second round. Probably will be Glenwood, but East St. Louis will probably get a little test there. But Bradley doesn't have to deal with any of those teams until potentially, like you said, the semifinals. So really a good situation for them. Let's take a real quick peek back at week 9 in that win over Andrew, if you don't mind. That was a little bit more of a scrap than maybe a lot of people thought it was going to be. But if you know past history in that series, that shouldn't be that big of a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Coach Cole. I think it was a volleyball game or something I had seen him at during the week last week, and he said, how tough they always play us. We always struggle with that offense, and the points were piled up on both sides in that one. But I think a good takeaway for the Boilers is, especially on the road, hey, in a game where we're going to need to kind of shoot it out and outscore the other team, we've got the offense that can do that. They know that their defense has been really good for a lot of the season. And I don't think they have too many worries heading in to the postseason on that side. As the ebbs and flows of a 9-week grind, especially of a school that size, probably some bumps and bruises are going to try and, kind of get nursed back as we start the playoffs here. But yeah, I think they expected that one to be as tough of a challenge as it was.
Switching gears to Kankakee, qualifying in the 5A field. But a lot of stuff happened with the Kankakee K's in week 9 that we weren't quite anticipating. I know you were there at that Crete-Monee game. Can you kind of break down not only what happened in the game that caused the K's to kind of pick up that surprising loss, but maybe some of the after effects that might be affecting the K's starting here in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, just a bit of a slow start offensively, and the Warriors, man, they have made so much progress from week 1 to week 9. And as you know, that's kind of a Coach Konecki signature staple thing is we might not be great at the start of the year, but you do not want to see us by the end of it. Yeah, it was just kind of a slow start. Some penalties really put them in a bad hole. I think 16 for $151 in terms of penalties. And then, Cedric Terrell the third, kind of a kid who I think's a lock on 5A All State. He goes out third play of the game, comes back in at halftime to play quarterback after Philip Turner left near the end of the first half with a finger hand injury of some sort. Does not sound like he's going to be able to go maybe at all in the playoffs, which really feel terrible for Philip. He's worked so hard to put together the year that he's had. But for the K's, it's next man up. Cedric's going to move from receiver to quarterback. He threw a touchdown pass last week. He's been the backup quarterback since he was a sophomore. So they have a lot of faith in him. They're just going to have to move some things around, figure it out. And, Lamont is not the easiest 5-4 that you could draw in the first round, but I think they know that they can handle their business. And then you get a showdown that a lot of people think could be worth a lot more than a second round game with Providence. I think a lot of eyes would be on that potential matchup next week.
Yeah, Lamont, one of those programs that you're used to hearing in the bracket, yet another one of those teams that's kind of down a class from what you're accustomed to. Lamont's had a lot of games in 6A. We were just talking about 6A. Lamont knows East St. Louis very well. They've run into them multiple times in the playoffs in the past. They slide down to 5A. To be honest, this is not as good. I don't think this is as good a Lamont team as we usually get. They've kind of scuffled on the back end of their schedule, and they almost never do that. Usually they schedule strong in the non-conference, maybe pick up a couple of losses, but then barrel through their conference. They were not able to do that this year. So I think if Kankakee does play well, I think you could potentially have that Kankakee-Providence game in round one, and it would be at Kankakee, which would be an added addition.
Yes, I do. As you mentioned, being familiar with East St. Louis, we should add, it's been, 15 years now, 16 years? Bradley Bourbonnais did meet East St. Louis in a Class 7A playoff game.
Yep.
East St. Louis was ranked nationally then, and
Yep.
the Boilers took it to them. It was a one-score game, went down to the wire, so they do have that experience. It's been a long time. Coach Cole wasn't even the head coach yet, but that was a classic playoff game way back when.
Fun story about that particular game in question. That was at the beginning of cell phone technology, and I had a very old BlackBerry, and someone started texting me updates of that game and was sending them to me, and the little dots were coming up, and it was taking them forever to send me the information. I have no idea who that person was. I do not know who it was that was sending me these updates, and they were just very slowly coming through my BlackBerry while I was covering another game, and they just kept coming through, and they must have sent me 50 text messages over the course of that afternoon. I still, to this day, have no idea who that person was, and they never revealed themselves to me. I even asked 2 or 3 times. I do not know who it was. I don't know how they got my phone number, but they kept me well informed on a very interesting Bradley Bourbonnais East St. Louis game at that time.
Now is the time to reveal yourself if you just saw it.
Absolutely. So should be an interesting watch for Kankakee to see how they develop with all those things that have kind of popped up over the next week and a half. Okay, moving along to the last city school. Looks pretty familiar, doesn't it, Mason? We've got a Bishop McNamara Herscher game again in the opening round of 3A. It's one of 14 games in the opening round statewide that features a game that has already been played this season. You were also at that game. What would you feel like kind of breaking that down from your memory? What does Bishop McNamara have to repeat, and what does Herscher have to do better to potentially pull the upset?
Well, in that game, I don't think people realize. They see the final score being, a three-score game. That was a back and forth, trading leads, trading punches game for about 3 quarters. And then towards the end, that Irish speed was just kind of too much and wore on the Tigers too much. The Tigers do have a bit of an advantage up front, although the Irish, that offensive and defensive line has gotten so much better since week 1. The Tigers are going to look to sustain long drives, keep the ball away from Mac. The Irish, they're going to look to strike quickly and get those big chunk plays out of kind of that spread option. Carter Krutzinger has been operating that very efficiently at quarterback. It's going to come down to just who wants it more, man. It's Mac versus Herscher. You and I both remember the last time these two teams played in the playoffs. it's a little deja vu. It's another Halloween game. It's another season in which Coach Kurt Quick has just gone from being a Bishop McNamara assistant to coaching the Herscher defense. So that's going to be fun to keep an eye on as well. But the Irish are going to hope for a different result. That was a game where future NFL running back Jonathan Ward was held in check on a super windy night. This year, though, I'm just really excited. I could not be more excited, really, for a game. Maybe if we would have gotten that Mac Mantino wish that you and I both had. But this, obviously, this community so well. This place is going to be rocking on Friday night.
Those that were at that previous matchup between Bishop McNamara and Herscher, especially on the Bishop McNamara side, are hoping that game is not played in a wind tunnel. It's one of the first times in my life I ever saw a punt go up in the air and visibly smack the wind wall and go back 15 yards. I don't know if I've ever seen that ever since or before. So that was a heck of an interesting situation. I haven't looked at the weather forecast, but I'm sure everybody involved probably wouldn't want that situation recreated. So, I think we're going to take a quick break here from our sponsors, and then we'll come down and break down the rest of the area matchups.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike. With dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country, we meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
Welcome back to the Kankakee Area Football Podcast. Mason, let's talk a little bit about some of the Illinois Central 8 teams that have qualified for the playoffs. We've already talked about one with Herscher, in their matchup with Bishop McNamara. Next up, let's switch gears to Coal City, who opens the playoffs with what I think is a pretty interesting game on paper as Sterling comes over to play the Kohlers. I don't know if Sterling knows this, but they might be walking into a buzzsaw with a very angry Coal City team after what happened to them in that showdown game with Wilmington. I got to be honest, I wasn't necessarily stunned that Wilmington won the football game, but I was stunned by the way that they were actually able to do it.
And, it's funny, like, I was too, but should we ever be shocked at anything that Coach Reeds and Coach Southall and them boys out at Wilmington do? It's like, we just shouldn't be. But at the same time, it makes no sense. The Coal City team, as strong as they are, was able to be defeated like that. Like, you just have to give so much respect to Wilmington and what the Wildcats do out there. And now that they slide into Class 2A, that we'll talk about the Wildcats later. But, yeah, the Kohlers, a Class 4A semifinalist a year ago. They've got plans on getting to at least that point again. Although the path in 4A is not an easy one by any means, starting with this week. Sterling is a pretty respectable opponent. I think that game's going to be a pretty good one, maybe one of the better ones in Class 4A. But, man, by the time the dust settles, it's hard to pick many teams that are going to be able to kind of hang with the Kohlers in terms of their explosiveness with their passing game and also the physicality they bring on both sides.
Switching gears to Mantino, you're looking at a team with, that got in the playoffs at 6-3. You were kind of wondering where they might fall. We touched on it a little bit before. Might end up playing Bishop McNamara. It ended up not happening because what basically happened there is you had 3 teams that finished with 6-3 records. They all had the same number of initial playoff points. That was Herscher, Mantino, and Princeton. So it was kind of a situation where where are those three teams going to fall? How are they going to be stacked? It turned out Mantino got the highest seed line there because of a second tiebreaker situation, and they're going to Monmouth Roseville. Kind of an interesting team over there that has been very, very productive this year. Their only loss of the season was to Rock Ridge, a very probably the top-ranked team in 2A at this point in time. Mantino looks like they've got a pretty big challenge right there.
I think they do, but at the same time, this is a Mantino team that since the summer has not really been at full health. They've had kids banged up since June, and starting with that Gibson City Melvin Sibley game in week 7, that's kind of the closest that they've been to 100% healthy has been these last 3 weeks. And they've won 3 games, 2 of them pretty convincingly, and one a huge gut check win at Peatone in week 8. I think the Panthers are maybe a little better than their record. I think maybe we haven't seen kind of the full capabilities of what they can do. And I think this is going to be a really, really competitive Class 3A game. You got to get off the bus well, obviously, after you make that long trip over, which perfect example here of let's just go to 1 through 32 seating in all classes. The geographic thing's not helping. But anyways, I like this Panthers team. I think that they've shown the last few weeks what kind of resilience they have, what kind of talent they have. And I think they're going to be a tougher out than most 12 seeds.
And then, like you mentioned before, Wilmington sneaking into that 2A draw where everybody was kind of watching that on, pairings night. Where are they going to fall? They were riding that 2A, 3A bubble the entire season, ended up landing in spot 64, which makes them the biggest school in 2A. And I think, honestly, even though there are a lot of undefeated teams in that 2A North bracket, I still think you have to look at Wilmington as honestly the favorite to come out of that group. I don't really see any way that you can you can pick another team. I don't know if you're right. I'll put it that way. So that's just where they're at. That one loss to Morris, an 8-1 4A team that is in contention to possibly win a 4A title. You can't.
And then you had that game won with a minute left.
Yeah. So they are in as good a position that I can remember a team being, based on heading into the bracket with that appears to be loaded on paper. I still like Wilmington to get out of that bracket. First step, a West Hancock team that, to be honest with you, on paper, I don't see any way they match up in this game. Congratulations to them for getting into the field. It's a program that struggled for several years, back-to-back 1-8 seasons for them. But I just genuinely, this looks like Wilmington will probably have very little difficulty getting into round 2.
I'm with you. And when you start to look at round 2 and beyond, yes, Wilmington, I think, is an overwhelming favorite. I think there's a good chance that we're going to get through the state championship weekend. Not only are they going to have a state championship trophy, I think they're going to probably have kind of the most, I'd say the highest scoring margin in their playoff round. I think they're just on that level right now. But with that being said, their bracket is not exactly easy. Seneca in round 2, the year they won state, they had to get by in a crazy overtime game against Seneca just to get there. Then looking at, like you said, the top seed in Rock Ridge after that, and then even in a semifinal, you're looking at any sort of either El Paso Gridley, Farmington, Aurora Christian, who I think is probably going to be who they would see in the semifinals. That's a lot of really good teams just in the north side. And then, of course, a team like Maroa Forsyth could be waiting on the other side. A team like Westville, maybe the most potent offense in Class 2A. So that's my long way of saying there's a lot of really good teams in Class 2A, but I don't think any of them are really that close to the Wildcats right now.
I started thinking about this when I was looking at it, kind of mocking out the rest of the playoff draw and how it could potentially go. And I don't even know how I would research this, but I'm kind of fascinated to watch to see if it plays out this way. I think Wilmington potentially, based on how the rest of the bracket goes, potentially could be in a situation where they might have to defeat 4 undefeated teams in a row to win a state championship. And I don't know how I would even go about looking that up, but I think that's a possibility. I think that they could potentially play Seneca in round 2. They could potentially play Rock Ridge in round 3. They could potentially play El Paso Gridley or Farmington in round 4. And then in the state championship game, they could play one of the undefeated teams from the south side of the bracket. I don't know if it's going to play out that way. I would doubt that it does, But if it does, that would show to the remarkable strength of what they would have to do to win a state title in two.
And I think they very well could. I think if they could do that, that is the most fitting kind of tribute to Coach Reents and what they do out there. That, hey, we just ended 4 perfect seasons in one year. That's crazy to think about.
Yep. So then now we'll move on to the lone team left standing from our Vermilion Valley contingent, the Clifton Central Comets. They opened the playoffs against Knoxville. And I had talked to some guys even way back early in the season from down there, with them moving into that 1A draw. Last year, they drew Lena Winslow right out of the gate. So they obviously did not have the opportunity to maybe get a feel for how their 1A experience was going to go. And what they were kind of hoping for was, maybe we get a draw, maybe we play well, we get a good seed, and we can stay away from one of those NUIC teams for a while. And that's exactly what the bracket gods have given them. That 4-seed, 13-seed game against Knoxville in the opening round play into a game where the winner of Rushville and Dwight, they would not potentially see an NUIC team until the quarterfinals. A very good NUIC team, possibly the best one in Stockton, but for all intents and purposes, if you are a Northern Illinois team, you figure you're going to see one of those teams sooner rather than later. So for Central, the draw that they wanted is, I think, the draw that they got.
I think so too. And before I get too far here, I think we both look at a really fun possible second round game against Dwight, a semi-tangential local game. Also would pit 2 teams with running backs named Evan Cox against one another. Fun fact there. Don't get to say that often. But yeah, I mean this Comets team, 32 playoff appearances that they've made. To have that continuity now as Coach Spooner retires and now Coach Perziz come in and just done a great job. They knew that this senior class had it in them, and their lone loss, they were the only team to really come anywhere close to Westville in the Vermilion Valley this year. A Westville team we just talked about that could see Wilmington in the Class 2A title game. I think that you take that and put that into the Class 1A field. Like you said, obviously, you got to get past a team like Stockton to get there. You'd have to get past Lena Winslow then in the semifinals probably. To be the best, you got to beat the best. And this Comets team has just as good a chance, I think, as anybody in 1A to end up as the best by the time they crown a champion.
Fair enough. Well, we got 2 teams that made it in through the 8-man playoffs. Milford, a little setback in week 9, kind of dropped their seed down a little bit. They have a challenging game with one of the stalwarts of 8-man football in Amboy. St. Anne ends up with a 6 seed, but it looks like, at least from what I've been able to pick up, a little bit of a challenging one here with an 11 seed in Edwardsville Metro East Lutheran. What's your take on those 2 teams and how they might fare?
I was talking to one of our part-time reporters, Michael Savoy, yesterday, getting him his IHSA credential. He'll be covering St. Anne for us on Saturday. And I was talking to him like the 8-man playoff bracket is pretty loaded. The 8-man Football Association has gotten pretty good in not even a decade. And that's evident by, Milford Cicina Park has been in every playoff. They're the 12 seed, and you feel like they've got a chance to make a run any year. St. Anne has, like you said, Metro East Lutheran, who's the 11 seed, who's got some really impressive wins on the year. I think both of those games are going to be really close, and that, I think, would really encapsulate the 8-man scene this year. You've got your Amboys, who Milford Cicina Park's got to play, Milledgeville, Pawnee. You've got your powerhouses. But there are a lot of really good football teams, and on the right day, I think the 8-man bracket is honestly probably the hardest to kind of long-term project or handicap than any of the IHSA fields. I
agree. So what's your schedule looking like for this weekend, Mason?
So Friday, I think everyone knows where I'll be. Herscher and Bishop McNamara. Maybe in costume. It's Halloween. Who knows? We'll see if we can get something together. The last time they played in the postseason, I was there dressed as Bobby Hill. So we'll see if we can get something to top that. Saturday, going to head over to Kankakee to watch the K's take on Lamont. We also have a pretty big sectional championship soccer game Saturday morning out in Coal City. Might try and slide out there. But before we get going, I do want to throw one little nugget out here to revert way back to the city schools. It's just the 5th time ever that Bishop Mack, Bradley Bourbonnais, and Kankakee have all made the same postseason. And there has never been a postseason in which all three of them won a game. There's only been twice where Bradley Bourbonnais and Kankakee won a game, and the Irish were nowhere to be found in the playoffs either of those years.
Yeah.
So we have a chance at some local history, and I wrote about this in the 2-minute drill column this week. I think it's a pretty good chance. I think the biggest chance at that being spoiled would be another local team getting a win if the Tigers were to upset the Fighting Irish. But potential for a really exciting weekend here in town, one that we've never seen before. And I think that's a testament to, I think you can agree on this too. And you just look at the impact our kids from around here are having at the college level and even the NFL level. Like we really have not had many spans of time where we've had this much football talent in this area.
Yeah. Even going in the Wayback Machine, when you start talking about the All-City Series, when those three schools would play each other on a yearly basis, you're right. It always seemed like we might have maybe two of the teams were really strong, but the third one maybe wasn't. It was very rare that we would get all three of them. So now that you're mentioning this, I'm sitting here trying to think back in my memories of any year where it would be expected that we would have all three of these teams in the playoffs. And I'm not really coming up with an answer to that because
2021, the last time Mac was in the playoffs, they were all there. And then my junior and senior year of high school, 08 and 09, the K's made a semifinal run one of those years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they lost to Wheaton St. Francis in the semifinals on a missed extra point. Yep. So
I think 89, right? Is that the other time?
Yep. So that is correct. So all right. Well, interesting fact. I appreciate it, and enjoy round one of the playoffs. And we'll see you back here next week with hopefully plenty to talk about.
Hey, hopefully we can have them at most 9 teams left after this week. Hopefully we've got 9 to talk about.